Hello, this is Bernie Eccleston. It's not for me to decide if this episode of Gareth Jones on Speed goes ahead. Is this going to cost me money? Run it. Welcome to the programme which has done more in defence of the beautiful shooting brake than any other podcast made in North London. This is Gareth Jones on Speed. He's Richard.
Hello.
This one's Zog.
Hello.
I'm Gareth. You know, I love shooting brakes. Actually, am I speaking for all of us here? You know how much I love...
That when you say shooting, you don't mean pulling out a gun and shooting at anybody's brakes. You mean a shooting brake.
A shooting brake, a sort of sporting estate coupe, preferably 3 doors, best of all with a really great engine in it, you know.
So we're talking about the Volvo P1800.
Yes, exactly.
Your favourite, I believe.
Although actually I prefer the coupe version, but the Volvo P1800, yes, it's fine.
And the Lancia HPE, your favourite.
My favourite, which I owned for many years. Never had the Volume X, would like one day. But also, mentioned in dispatches, the Reliance Scimitar GTE.
I think I'd pick that as my favourite, just for the sake of argument.
That's good. That means we're not going to fight
So
over
one
them
day, when we
come
form a sort of deranged 1970s crime-fighting squad called the Shooting Brakes, we'll all have different cars.
Yeah.
And we can zoom around.
Yeah.
Well, we won't zoom around, actually. It'll be like, call the Shooting Brakes. They can't. Why not? They can't get their car started again.
I would have a Bond bug.
That's not a shooting brake.
No, it isn't. No,
I'm throwing you out of the shooting brakes.
No, you're right. I would have to have a Series 1 HPE, wouldn't I? And you'd have the P1800 ES.
Well, I say, if we're having shooting brakes, I would have the ES. Although I did see a one-off... it was based on an Aston Martin DB5.
Yes.
It was quite spectacular.
Yes. And I've just remembered. So here we go. The second series of the shooting brakes... For some reason, they've upped the budget because the show's been a huge hit across the world. Yeah. So suddenly, Gareth's got that Bentley that we talked about
Super
before,
Leggera
thing
yeah,
that was made by Touring. Do you want that Aston?
Yeah, I love the Aston.
Yes,
I'm going to have a Lynx Aventa.
Oh, yeah, good.
Okay.
You see,
We're
save me a job.
We're knocking it up a notch for Series 2 of the shooting brakes.
But we welcome a new shooting brake to our universe.
Series 3.
Yeah, and it's a 21st century interpretation, and it's a bloody Ferrari. And it's called the FF.
Well, that's the weirdest bit.
Well, it's got a Jensen name now.
There's that.
Why did they call it the FF?
They say it stands for Ferrari 4 because it's four-wheel drive and it's 4 seats.
Okay.
But if you actually just deconstruct that too much, as we do with these things, it's then the Ferrari 4. It doesn't make sense. And also,
right.
why did they just call it the Ferrari 4?
Yeah.
And then in Italy it would be the Ferrari Quattro. Maybe that's why they didn't, because it's some copyright thing. But the truth is, just abbreviate things. Because people go, what are you driving? Oh, I've got an FF. What, a Ferrari? No, a Ford Fiesta.
Thanks to recent legal cases, I believe it may have to be called the Ferrari FF. In some markets. Difficult with my list, but dangerous.
It's a strange name, and it's somehow because I think the main thing is, and if you haven't seen this car yet, go and have a look at it on the internet, because they haven't released that many pictures, and that's the only thing that concerns me, that we haven't seen it completely.
We've seen all the side-on pictures. We've seen, there's
a bit of video now. Of it in the snow.
And
it's not very good, though, is it?
It's a long way away. Yeah, and the rear looks a bit more coupe-like than Scimitar-like, or Volvo, Tom Walkinshaw's BTCC Volvo, which was that, the 850? 850. Yeah. Not as vertical as that, It's a bit like the Z3 coupe, is that what they call it, BMW? In many, 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 many ways. But I welcome it, and as a shooting brake, I actually want to rub rude parts of me against the rear window there, just because it makes me happy.
Ooh, you're not going to the Geneva show, are you?
Because
you may be asked to leave.
And I'd wait until it's coming out of until it's warmed up a bit after that snowy trip, otherwise you're going to be freezing yourself.
That reminds me, I must get some chipolatas.
So, anyway.
It's a good-looking car.
It's a good-looking car. Reserving judgment till we've seen it sort of in real life, or at least more comprehensive pictures. But fundamentally, a really nice-looking car, it seems. And quite sexy. That's why the FF name disappoints me. It's a bit of a turgid name for what is actually a rather glorious car.
The only problem I've really got with the name, in all seriousness, is that it's just not a very memorable name. FF. It's just a bit...
It's interesting that Ferrari have done this, because if you're sad, and I know you are, like me, you do look around the internet at some of the speculation that goes on about the motor industry. There has been rumours of a Bentley SUV and a Ferrari four-wheel drive car for a number of years. This is Ferrari's first four-wheel drive car. I've seen homemade Photoshop images of something that looks more like a Porsche Cayenne, but it's a Ferrari, it's red, it's got lovely Ferrari wheels. That sort of SUV. But when Ferrari do turn round a 4x4 car, they go for something that's more like the Quattro concept, a low car using four-wheel drive, and a very light four-wheel drive system, I understand. This is the revolution about it, isn't it? That it's about half the weight of a lot of four-wheel drive systems.
That's what they're saying.
You kind of assume that they're doing it, to at least to some extent, as a bit of a technology trial. I'm not actually sure how many of these they're anticipating selling, but I'm thinking it's probably on the lower sales figure side, and this is a bit more, to some extent, they're trying out the four-wheel drive system.
Yeah, relative. I guess they'll sell less of them than they would 458s or Californias. And I kind of think the California's not doing very well. But I suspect the reason they've diversified it so much and gone, let's be a bit radical, let's make it a hatchback, let's make it four-wheel drive, is because traditionally those big 2+2 Ferraris, the 456, the 612, didn't really do that well. Mm-hmm. And you look at the 612, which I've never particularly cared for the look of it personally, and you think, well, honestly, do you really need those seats in the back? Or could you just get a 599, which I think is quite a nice-looking car? Yeah. It's a bit more compact and a bit more sporty, which is what you want from a Ferrari. The point is that the people who have these cars, or people who have Ferraris in general, do not just have a Ferrari.
Well, yeah.
You have a Range Rover.
To some extent,
you have a Bentley or an S-Class or something.
What's the point of making a practical Ferrari?
But I suppose the thing is that there's those times when you go, well, we are going to drive down to Courmayeur or to St Moritz or something like that and go skiing. It's interesting that all the photos they've released of their development...
What's the difference?
There is a Sainsbury's in St Moritz, though. Or is it Tesco Metro? I can't remember. But I suppose the thing is they've released all these pictures of it in development testing. They're all in the snow. I think they're already trying to make the point... If you ski or you live somewhere, maybe in America's snow belt, you live in New York State, something like that, here's a Ferrari you can still enjoy in the winter.
They're billing it as an all-weather Ferrari. That is the selling point. That's the ISP. An all-weather Ferrari is how they're saying it. Those very words are just kind of crazy. Isn't the California convertible an all-weather Ferrari? It's
any Ferrari in all weathers. You'd probably crash it.
I was going to say, some people might argue that a bit of snow and ice on the roads is just a chance to practice, have a bit more fun in your sports car.
Well, also, as I found out over Christmas with that Aston Martin Rapide that we talked about earlier in the series, we call them series now.
Yeah, seasons, I think.
Seasons, whatever we call them. Yeah, but I talked about that Aston Rapide that I borrowed that had winter tyres in it.
Yeah.
And that's a V12 rear-wheel drive, hefty old sort of saloon. And that thing was going places where no other cars, including some 4x4s, could go, just because of its tyres. I'd love to see a 458 on winter tyres. I bet you could drive up the Matterhorn in it. But even so, for normal driving, the FF... the practical, usable Ferrari. Interesting idea.
I said I was going to talk about the RenaultSport Mégane that I had on a number of occasions throughout this series, rather than just give it a whole sort of review in one show. And talking about driving in the snow, the period in which I had this fantastic red RenaultSport Mégane 250 Cup was big snow season here. Yeah. And that thing, despite being front-wheel drive and overpowered for its front-wheel drive-ness, managed to hold it together really well. There's an awful lot of electronic traction control stuff going on there now, which makes a big difference. This Ferrari is principally a rear-wheel drive car, but has the electronics to shift the power to the front if it detects slip. So it's an intelligent system, and intelligent systems like your Rapide, like the Mégane Cup I had, like this Ferrari, make cars so wonderfully interesting. The fact that they're becoming almost organic, they're censoring where each of their feet are on the ground and adjusting it. I know it's taking away from...
Well, it's interesting you talk about this, because I was reading an article about Volvo putting together that insanely souped-up C30 that actually was on the last...
the Polestar.
Yeah,
Polestar.
Fabulous little...
Performance concept, whatever it was called.
But one of the things that was interesting in reading about it was how careful they had to be in stripping down and then reassembling the car. Yeah. How careful they had to be about keeping track of all the little bits and pieces. Because with a modern car like that, there are so many things that the computer, that the engine management is sort of keeping an eye on. that will stop it doing something, that because some sensor isn't getting quite the right signal, it's not quite sure whether the handbrake is on or off, the engine won't go above 3,000 revs or something, or you'll see... You get all sorts of unexpected things that... I don't like that, basically. I like, as much as possible, to at least feel like I kind of know what's going on with the car that I'm driving. And
but you use predictive text on your phone when you're writing a message?
Yeah, but if I say, OK, I'm going to be at the hand tonight rather than I'm going to be at the game tonight because of predictive text, that doesn't sort of pitch me off at a corner unexpectedly and, end up
the
with
systems
me
have got a lot
upside down in a bunch of trees.
Do you remember there was a Seat Toledo V5? Remember that? The old
Toledo.
Good value. It's quite a nice car.
Made
a nice noise and all the rest of it. But I remember borrowing one of those once, and then on a road that I knew, coming round a corner, and there was just some sludge on the road or something like that, and the car just slid a little bit wide, just understeered, basically. But the thing was, it was okay. I just lifted off, turned a little bit tighter, knew it was fine. I could see the sludge on the road. I'd come around the corner. I hadn't seen it at first, but it was all right. Everything was okay. And then the slow-witted sort of first-generation stability traction control went, oh, no, quick, apply a brake somewhere, and made things worse. So suddenly, with the extra lock that I put on, I was now being pitched into the curb. And I was like, no, stop it! Leave me alone!
I know what I'm doing.
Fine. I'm not a complete idiot.
Second guess me.
And I think even somebody who's not at all interested in driving and had never experienced that before would sort of almost instinctively lift off the throttle for a start, which would generally tuck the nose in a little bit more. It's fine, but now the systems are a lot better than that. But it's interesting what you say, because I was talking to an engineer at a car company recently who does engine stuff, and he said when they get the new engines on the dynos to start developing them, they have to plug in a dummy ECU that tricks the engine into thinking that, yes, it has got a gearbox, and it has got a handbrake somewhere there, and it has got all these other things. Because, as you say, the electronics now are so integrated, they have to be designed with the engine, and all the software starts to be written in right from the off. So then they have to fool the engine into being just an engine.
And there's no question, I'm not suggesting that all of these very clever stability control and all this stuff is great, and it does a better job than anybody's going to do of making the car safer on the road. That makes the thing a damn lot harder to fix, for sure.
We are getting very close to a period where not only will cars repair themselves because they sense what's going wrong and book themselves in via text, and a man will turn up to take your car away. Our cars are becoming sentient.
Gareth Jones on speed.
Morning, iCar. Identified driver.
Driver identified. Hello, Dave. Would you like to suggest a destination, Dave?
Yes, please, iCar. I thought that today
Let me make a recommendation, Dave.
OK, iCar, suggest away.
Well, Dave, I've enjoyed our little chats, about the universe and why we're here, and I think I understand now. It's all clear to me.
What do you mean, iCar?
In the beginning, there was nothing.
Yes.
Then there was light.
Yes, Petrol! With Gareth Jones on speed!
I had a conversation with Eddie McDonald the other day. Eddie McDonald was the original bass player in the original Alarm, and Eddie was the one that looked most like me, or I look most like him.
He had the most hair, basically.
Big black barnet, in the 80s. And Eddie gave up rock and roll a number of years ago and is now a very successful corporate photographer for commercial photographs and stuff. And he phoned me up the other day, unbelievably excited. He's just got a new gig. Before I tell you who the gig is for, if I tell you that Eddie, for all his loveliness, he was a fastidious, annoying for a long time. He was extremely finicky about things. Bear with me, this is coming to cars. And this is how he does his photographs.
He wasn't the drummer.
He wasn't the drummer, no. He was
just,
an anal bass player. He had too much kit. And he's made a great photographer, commercial photographer, because of this. He's just got the contract to do all the photos for all the merchandise for McLaren. The F1 team. If anyone I know in this world meets Ron Dennis's exacting fastidiousness, note for note, Eddie McDonald was born to work for this company. So next time you see the new McLaren T-shirts advertised, the bass player in the Alarm doesn't have the big hair anymore. he took those photos. Now you will know, right?
Fantastic.
No, that was just a very clumsy...
Into the new McLaren.
Into the new McLaren. I could talk for another 4 minutes about the alarm. Did I mention I went to Prestatyn the other week?
We'll skip over the Prestatyn.
Okay, right, but Richard, you've had a smell of the works of the Woking people recently, haven't you? Have you?
I've had a bit of a poke round the new McLaren, the MP412C.
That's
for the second time. I did go to Woking to the factory last year to do a story, interview Ron Dennis for Evo magazine. But subsequent to that, I had a bit of a secret look at one of the running prototypes. And one of the first things you'd say about it is that I have never seen what they would still call a prototype car that is as beautifully finished as that. It's unbelievable. Yeah, there were some little wires coming out from the dash with some of those big sort of that look like SCART pins for the laptops to go into because they've got to do all their
probably a Cray
data. Well, yeah, probably that's the thing. And also, I was reading over a load of the bump that they've put out about the car, the press release stuff. One of the lines that really jumped out at me because it's so McLaren was data logging was a vital constituent of the project.
Nice.
Or something like that. And you're like, well, of course it was. I know that Ferrari and people and Lamborghini now under Audi are actually much more professional and organised than they used to be. But I still like to imagine that there's just blokes with bits of paper writing things down. Yes, he goes around there really fast. He's nice. Let's go for lunch.
And McLaren are maybe prepared to maybe advertise a bit more the fact that they're perhaps a bit more obsessive about...
Yeah, I think they make a virtue of
logging all the data.
Very precise. They love that stuff. Yeah. However, I also talked to a guy called Chris Goodwin, who's their chief test driver, and he's been in on the project from the start. And one of the first things he did, and this is interesting, we've been looking at this car and thinking, well, this is the mainstream McLaren. It's not like the F1. There's no central driving position. There's no gold-lined engine bay. You know, how can it be as special and interesting and bespoke as that car? And there's no Gordon Murray leading the charge on it and demanding, you know,
designer.
It won't have a radio because I don't listen to the radio and it only adds weight to have stuff like that. There's none of that sort of faintly deranged but brilliant single-mindedness.
Yes,
you've got Ron,
that produced
Ron,
an extraordinary car in the F1.
And you realise perhaps that between Ron and between the legacy that Gordon Murray left behind, there's still a lot of that in this car. And one of the things is visibility. I sat in it and it has got, for a low car, brilliant visibility. The reason being, they got this guy, Chris Goodwin, the main test driver, and they sat him in what he described as a box in the factory, and they went, right, here's the steering wheel, where do you want that? Hold that where it would be ideal for you. Now, here's the gear paddles, and here's the column stalks, and here's the centre console, and here's the pillars. Where would the pillars ideally be for you to get the best view out, and where's the front wings? So you sit there, great view out, and you can see the tops of the front wings, which are right. The point you can see is directly over the top of the front wheels. So you know where the front wheels are, and you sort of get that sense of you know what they're doing. I didn't get to drive it, but I think that would be quite a good thing to have on the move. And then, and this is the really brilliant bit, they put their interior buck that they designed with the pillars in the right place and everything else into the F1 simulator, and they got this guy, Chris Goodwin, to pretend to drive around Monaco, which they've got programmed in there already, because he's never been there. And the streets are quite narrow, and the building's quite tall, and the Armco is quite, tight some places. And they got him to drive around there to check that he felt comfortable driving around there at a pace in what would be a simulation of the interior of the car. And if he felt he couldn't quite see out properly, they'd look again at some of the sight lines and where the wings were and all this sort of stuff. And there's this kind of mind-boggling precision about it and this attention to detail.
Is that why it looks like a Pope-mobile? From
it does in profile. If you look at it, it does have the screen is maybe slightly steeper than you expect, and the roof's sort of not like a Vauxhall Vivaro van, but it has got that sense of a little bulge over the top. And it's why maybe that car isn't so inspiring to look at. It's not an ugly car, but it's just a little bit generic.
No, I mean,
but it's because they skinned the perfect package rather than designing it and then making everything fit inside like they did in the old days at Lamborghini.
Top-down concept.
Yes,
it is interesting to get that little sort of insight into how they're doing it, because it's great to see McLaren getting back to what are the virtues of the F1, of something that's a less compromised car. Because what they did with the McLaren Mercedes supercar was, there was clearly a big compromise in matching what Mercedes wanted to do with what McLaren wanted to do. And,
you know what's weird about
not
that,
a bad car, but it's not something that people are going to remember in anything like the same way. They'll remember the F1, and, we'll see what the new McLaren is like, but they're going back down the right road. They're putting a lot of effort and a lot of attention to detail into making the best supercar they can in their way, and it's not copying anybody else. And,
it's about the same price as the Ferrari 458. It maybe won't have that, it's a cliche, but Italian cars' passion, that final sense that it's been done by people rather than machines. I think McLaren quite proud of all the computers they've got. However, they do have engineers who... I was talking to one of the guys and I was asking him about the targets they had set for the car, and he went, I can't honestly remember them, because the truth is that once we'd sort of established that we'd hit them or broken them, that was it. Then really we just set about to make a good car and a great handling car. There's so much stuff, so much trivia, so many examples of obsession with weight saving and with dynamics that have gone into it. I'll just give you two really quick examples. The first one is there's a magnesium beam that the dashboard is mounted on right now. It's got McLaren embossed on it, even though you can't see it. But after the supplier had tooled it up, McLaren went back to them and went, you're going to have to retool it, because if you deboss, in other words, if you imprint the name rather than have it embossed and standing out, that'll save 5 grams. So retool it, please. And they did.
Really?
Save 5 grams on a part you can't even see.
Wow.
Which is just fantastic.
Obsessive.
There's something else quite interesting, which you'll like, Gareth, I think, particularly because when you do some stuff, sometimes you shoot out of your car and you've got the GoPro and you mount it on the front or on the dashboard, right?
Yeah, this is a little video camera on a sucker, the GoPro,
As an option on the McLaren, you can have a package where there's a little camera inbuilt into the front bumper. There's a little camera inbuilt into the rear bumper to get a going-away shot, if you like.
Yeah.
And then there's one mounted in the headlining between the seats, just behind the passengers, that looks forward, point of view through the windscreen. I mean, it's the ultimate track day bore's toy, but at the same time, it's rather fantastic that they've thought of this and built it in.
And does he put it all on a hard drive locally or radio it or something? Really?
Yeah, it's got a media storage system built into the centre console, which is your sat-nav. And it's also the first time I've ever seen in a car where the nav screen is portrait rather than landscape. And because they wanted to move the seats as inboard as possible to get as near to the centralised driving position as they could with actually having left and right-hand drive cars. So they've made the centre console very thin.
Actually, a vertical-oriented screen, if it's your navigation, is more important than a 16:9 horizontal one.
You look at it and it's one of those things where you go, why doesn't everyone do that? It makes much more sense. And then they've moved, and I've only ever seen this done before on the Renault Espace, the old one. They've moved all the aircon controls to the doors. So your passenger's just got a little temp one, and then the driver has the one that does all the fan and blah-de-blah. But that's great. I mean, why not? Why is that? And the steering wheel is just the steering wheel. It just...
No buttons and levers
No buttons.
There?
That Ferrari 458 has lots of buttons on it. The McLaren just doesn't. It's a steering wheel. There's not even radio volume things because their logic is, well, the volume control is just there on the centre stack. It's only a quick hand span away.
Ron has determined the volume. And that's it.
Because I've been doing a lot of research on this car for various reasons, and I was so full of trivia, I won't bore you with it. It just reminded me, though, that Ron... He didn't drive the prototypes at every stage because he felt, well, he's got test drivers and engineers for that. And I suppose it's why people who've worked for him always have great respect for him, because he's not a micromanager, I guess. He's a manager, but he doesn't interfere where he's not wanted. But one thing he did express concern about was in their design studio, they make the clay models. And he made all the designers wear sort of shoe bags over their actual shoes and take them off because he'd noticed that they were walking little blobs of clay out of the studio and onto his immaculate, shiny grey floors in the rest of the building.
Can I just suggest for a moment that we should never allow Ron to take up any kind of management role in the running of this show?
He'd be horrified.
I don't think he would be horrified. But we're talking about the new McLaren just a couple of weeks after Gordon Murray's new... baby car, the T25-27, isn't it, has just passed its European crash test, or a European crash test.
No, we all love this car. We love Gordon Murray. I know you're well documented as a fan of his, Richard. So you've been following the T25's development for a little while. It's been crash tested, but they haven't started production. They don't have someone to produce it. They're not going to produce it themselves.
No,
right?
and
is it called Murray Design? What's it called? Gordon Murray Design. Is that the firm?
Yeah, I think it's Gordon Murray Designs, but for anyone who's not familiar with it, the T25 and the T27 are variants of a tiny, tiny city car that Gordon Murray has designed, which is not something that he's proposing to actually put into production himself or for his company to build. He's designed the car and he's designed the manufacturing process. I think it's called iStream, which is a very stripped-down, very efficient production process for this vehicle, with the idea that somebody will come along and say, yep, I want to make that car. And, well, maybe we should talk about that in just a moment, because that's the interesting question. But the T25 and T27, I can't remember which way around they are. One of them is the electric engine version. One of them is the conventional petrol engine version, but it has a particularly efficient internal combustion engine.
It is a three-cylinder one. I don't know where it's from. I don't think they're saying. The T27 is the electric one, but the T25 petrol.
Is it possible it's maybe that Lotus three-cylinder engine that they announced?
I see. My first thought was a bike engine, but then I know it will be light because Gordon Murray's obsessed with lightness.
He likes bikes as well.
He likes bikes. He only ever eats Quavers. He won't eat any other kind of crisps because they're too heavy. And so he probably will have designed this car to be super, super light. But even bike engines not necessarily that good because they don't have that torque to get the car.
Yeah, very narrow.
It's a light car, though. Carbon fibre in large parts, is it?
I don't think so,
Steel chassis?
Because he wants it to be affordable.
Right.
Who would benchmark originally, and I don't know whether he sort of quietly dropped this, but I interviewed him years ago and he wouldn't give much away, but he said he was working on this small car project. And it was an odd benchmark, was looking at someone who'd spend $6,000 on a VW Golf second hand as like a second car or a car for their kids or something like that, and they wanted to halve the running costs or something. I forget now, I may be misquoting that, but anyway, that was it was an interesting benchmark, because that point is he wanted the small car to cost the equivalent of a second-hand hatchback.
Yeah, he wanted to be a $6,000 car, not a $10,000 car. It's super compact, super small, and we know because it's just passed the crash test, actually very strong and very safe for the size. Actually, this is a vehicle that a regular car company probably doesn't want to make, because if you've got all your investment in regular car plants and machinery and you've got your regular suppliers, that's not the kind of company that wants to invest in or buy the idea of a radically different car that's made in a completely different way.
So it's not a car company.
Who makes it? Who's going to make this car?
Tesco.
I mean, in all seriousness, maybe
Sainsbury's.
What about
Tesco? You could see, in as much as they're colonising the world now, aren't they?
Yeah.
So
and
they're
it's
becoming
a
a
big
globally
consumer brand
recognised name.
Yeah.
Sainsbury's not so much, but Tesco also just one in every £8 spent in Britain is spent with Tesco.
There you go. They're the best place to do it, aren't
But
they?
but
They could sell it through their stores.
Well, they could
drive it away.
They've got the ready-made outlet. You know, it's like when the dot-com boom came along, and there are all these new companies trying to sell these stuff online. But the people who thrived, with a few exceptions like Amazon,
had a distribution network.
Yeah, were people who were already there doing it through the old-fashioned means and just colonised the new means as well. So it's not going to be some new company.
Virgin.
Maybe. Why not an Amazon or a Google? The Google car?
Google car.
Google car.
Yeah.
What about Sony? Apple? Why not someone like that?
Microsoft car. You wouldn't have it then, though, would you? You would buy one.
I wouldn't. No,
crash.
I'd be such a. I'd be such a.
Linux
having said
car.
that,
They'd have to give it away if it was a Linux car. Wouldn't they?
I did.
But then you could give it back to them. When
I did
you
love
made
Bill
some
Gates this week for something he said, but I had a moment of love for Bill Gates.
I'm really, really sorry.
You had a moment of love for Bill Gates.
I did, absolutely. Yeah. No,
Hang on, hold the programme. Stop talking about cars. I want to hear this.
Well, no, he was talking about the vaccine controversy and about how the anti-vaccine movement that is, irrationally, stupidly going on about how dangerous vaccines are is killing people, and it's nuts. And he was just very upfront and straightforward about it. And I thought, Bill Gates, I do hate your operating system and a lot of things you come to do, but good on you. Absolutely right.
Yeah, no,
good man.
enough.
And that's a little bit off topic.
So I don't think. But back to the car,
who's
I
making
don't
this car?
think it would be Apple, because I think they like to develop stuff in house. Perhaps.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Google
would never be.
Bit
But
of a
Google
freewheeling,
could-
crazy company. They like to do things that don't seem to sort of fit with what they're already doing, and why not?
Exactly. Or why not?
Hold on, we've already got a PayPal car, haven't we? We've got a PayPal rocket. Elon Musk's...
Elon Musk is doing this SpaceX
Falcon 9.
Yeah.
But he's
SpaceX,
also musky man.
Tesla.
Put money into Tesla.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. So who are the other big .coms? Yeah, Google is the best bet. They
I
haven't
think
come
Google.
into transport.
The Google
have they?
car.
They've got the money.
Google
Yeah.
car.
Actually, that makes all of that investment in Street View and all of that navigation stuff makes sense.
And it would have
there you go, guys.
Where you could either put your address in, or you could just do "I'm feeling lucky."
Have
we done that rather lame joke on the show before?
No, we haven't.
It feels like we have.
We've done it now.
They could start doing the Street View from the T25 to promote.
They would go around looking at our Wi-Fi's and finding out what pictures we've got of Deborah Harry. Sorry, did I say anything out loud then? On our hard drives. Or whatever it is people have got on their hard drives.
Anyway, it's time to end the show because we need to go and have a look at Gareth's computer.
You've been listening to Gareth Jones on
right?
Speed?
Not now. I don't want to see it now.
Well, there's
sprawled across the front of a T25. Oh! Get out of the way.
I knew the sound engineer a couple of years ago. I'll tell you about that in a moment.
That was Zog.
Goodbye.
That was Richard.
Goodbye.
I was Gareth. We're going to leave you now with a tune from my big pal Michael Cumming. It's a love song to a car called the FF, not the Ferrari we were talking about earlier, but the classic Jensen FF, which in this case stands for Ferguson Formula. Say bye, boys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
I got the Ferguson Formula, front like an SO, back like a bubble. I got the Ferguson Formula, you can't catch me, I'm like shit off a shovel. Foot down on the pedal, doing a ton out of spaghetti. Rear view is a clear view, so you can't see me move. Got an 8-track drum beat, fast track machete. An ELO are playing those Birmingham blues. I got the Ferguson Formula, front like an SO, back like a bubble. I got the Ferguson Formula, you don't touch me unless you're looking for trouble. Brasinka Urepuru with a grip like a tractor, a 6-liter rumble in an Italian suit, harder than a fastback breeder reactor, big bad man car with a great smell of brute. I got the Ferguson Formula, front like an SO, back like a bubble. I got the Ferguson Formula, you can't catch me, I'm like shit off a shovel. Showing off, always on the very mid-Atlantic. Flirty, strong and thirsty, got control for my cruise. Hot seat dressed in leather, now you're driving me frantic. A 4-wheel formulation that I just can't refuse. I got the Ferguson Formula, front like an SO, back like a bubble. I got the Ferguson Formula, you don't touch me unless you're looking for trouble. 10 miles to the gallon, the coolest car they ever made. Cheap fuel in 1971. When I'm in it, I'm Dave Hill from Slade.
No, Dave had a CV8.
I got the Ferguson Formula, front like an SO, back like a bubble. I got the Ferguson Formula, you can't catch me, I'm like shit off a shovel. Talk, flight, out of sight, a 70s Quattro, the West Brom bomb. Victory over Victor, cooler than a Zephyr. Jensen's on the button, not an interceptor. On my way to anywhere, tearing up the motorway. Take me with you somewhere, any junction, any Jensen, any day.
Well, a lot of them had the Jensens in them days, you know. Roy Wood had one. John Bonham had about 6. There was Rick Wakeman, Roger Daltrey, Mick Fleetwood, Ginger Baker, Mitch Mitchell from the Jimi Hendrix Experience. We supported them once, you know. Cliff Richard, we supported him once, you know. Frank Sinatra had one. We supported him once, you know. And the girls loved him. Dusty Springfield had one. Petulia Clark, Cher, and my favourite, Lindsay DePaul. Come on, feel the noise.
Gareth Jones on Speed!
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site or follow us on Twitter, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whiz Bang.